My name's Brandon, and my mission is to show you the evidence of the kingdom of God. So many Christians live their lives as if God doesn't exist. They say they believe in him, but they don't actually walk it out. I honestly believe exploring places like Israel is going to give us context around the Bible that we didn't have before. So buckle up and subscribe as we make the kingdom real to you. Welcome to the Israel series. We're going to be talking about so many different locations here in Israel, but before we get to those locations, I have to make this video first. We're going to be talking about different locations, time periods, and understanding really what is actually going on in Israel. It gets kind of confusing at some of these locations because you have things that are stacked up on each other from different time periods, different people, and different ages that kind of go throughout history. Old Testament, New Testament, and modern day. So there's a lot of different things that we have to talk about as we get into understanding Israel. But I will give you a little bit of a sneak peek of this theater right here from Caesarea Maritima. So first things first, let me show you our companion for this entire Israel series, and that is this topographical map of Israel. It's going to help us to navigate exactly where we are so that you can see this place as more than just a fantastical far-off location, but actually see exactly where these different locations are and see the different regions all throughout Israel. So let's talk about the three key areas we're going to focus on most during this Israel series, starting with this, the beautiful Sea of Galilee. This is one of the most prominent locations for Jesus' ministry, and it has so many first century locations that are going to be important for us to understand during our journey. Next, we'll move south to the Dead Sea area. There are a few really key locations here that span all the way back from the time of King David and beyond, all the way to the modern day, and understanding why this location is so important. Then our last location will be just to the west of the northern side of the Dead Sea, and this, of course, is the holy city itself, Jerusalem. Of course, this is the location where a lot of things happen with Jesus, including his death and resurrection, but there are so many amazing locations here in Jerusalem to discover, and we're going to talk about quite a few of them, especially around the Temple Mount. So every single episode, what we'll do is show you exactly where these things are on the map. We'll probably even pull up Google Maps as well to show you that this is a real place that really exists today. That's what the whole purpose of these videos are. Now, within these three locations, obviously many people have been all throughout the land of Israel for thousands and thousands of years. And throughout all of that time, there are different rulers that came in and out and controlled different parts of Israel throughout it. So we have to really simplify this in order to make it really easy for everybody to understand what's going on here. Some would say that these are split into 6 different time periods: the Canaanite period, the Israelite period, the Persian and Hellenistic period, the Roman and Byzantine period, the Islamic period, and then the modern period. However, this can get really complicated, and a lot of these time periods won't apply to what we're talking about in Israel during these videos. So let's simplify it a little bit. Most of what we're going to talk about in these videos and what I prioritize on our group trips to Israel are first century pieces of archaeology. These are towns or ruins or artifacts that have to do with directly the time of Jesus. Obviously, this is going to be the most important things that we're going to look at, and that's the majority of our videos here. So most of the time we will use this as a baseline in order to orient you in where we are in history. Then we'll talk about some things that I'll call the Old Testament-y stuff. This has to do with a lot of different characters and a lot of different eras of time, but as we get to those videos, I'll be more specific within those time periods. These are things before the New Testament that would have been in the Old Testament or referenced in the Old Testament. The next group that we see a lot of archaeology from is the early Christians. This includes the Byzantines, which is basically what was left over of the Roman Empire after Rome fell. And of course, other groups that became the early Christians from the apostles spreading the word, as well as Paul doing all of his travels. So there's a lot of different places here that we'll see from the early Christians as well. And sometimes these places get intermingled. This is one of the things that makes interpreting these different archaeological locations pretty difficult. If you don't understand which time periods these different things come from, you can get really confused because a lot of these time periods are stacked up on one another. And then the archaeologists may dig out a portion of the 3,000-year-old part, but then also dig out a portion of an early Christian church from 400 AD right next to it. And if that wasn't confusing enough, a lot of these national parks in different areas are trying to reconstruct these buildings that have fallen over from earthquakes or different things like that. And so on top of all of these different time periods, there's also restoration. And this is what I'm talking about right here. We're going to experience this all over Israel, not just here in Caesarea Maritima, where you have original steps here, which obviously are corroded over time. But then you have new construction that is made to basically make this space more functional or safer, depending on what area it's in. We'll have many more examples of this in the upcoming videos. You have to understand that most of these locations have been found in the last 100 years, and some of them in the last 20 years. So depending on who owns the land, this is a variable as well. For example, you might have a hotel right next to a first century synagogue, or you could have a whole nother building built directly on top of a very important archaeological find. Or in the best case scenario, in my opinion, you have places that are nearly untouched, places that are reconstructed so that people can come see them. However, they are mostly intact from where they were found. Then you have some of the hardest places to understand, which are the places that have had churches built on them over and over and over again for the last couple thousand years. And I totally understand that all of this information can get really overwhelming, and we're going to go over everything as we go through each episode of the series. Most of these episodes are going to be focusing on a specific area during a specific time, and so we're going to be talking about that every single episode. For example, our first episode next week is going to be at Caesarea Maritima. This is one of the only locations that is outside of these 3 locations that we just talked to you about. This is actually on the coast of Israel. Caesarea Maritima means Caesarea by the sea, and that's the Mediterranean Sea. So obviously this is a little bit of an outlier in terms of the main locations that we're focusing on. However, all of the same things apply here in terms of what era this is from. We're going to be focusing on the 1st century here. It was built before the 1st century, but it was in use during the time of Jesus and afterwards, which is what we're mostly going to be talking about in the next episode. This foundational video is one of the most important that we're going to make in this series because it's going to help you to understand where and when these different things happen. This is a key component in making the kingdom real to you. If I tell you, hey, I'm going to meet you down on Main Street, you have to know where that Main Street is in order to get there and see that it's an actual place, right? Israel is the same thing. If we read in the Bible that something happened at Caesarea, then we need to know where Caesarea is and which one it's talking about, Caesarea Philippi or Caesarea Maritima. And this plays into certain cultural names for things such as the other side of the Galilee or the Decapolis. Things like this we're going to go over throughout this series in order to help you understand where these locations are and what they actually were. So real quick, let's go back over the 3 locations and the 3 eras that we're going to be focusing on during this series. First is the Sea of Galilee. This is an amazing location with a ton of different stuff that's really important around it. Then Jerusalem, of course, the Holy City. This is a place that so much happened, and of course the center of all of the feast days for Judaism. Then the Dead Sea. While we don't see a ton of biblical moments here, there are some major historical things that we're going to find out over here, as well as some really cool biblical moments. Then to simplify the time periods in Israel, we are going to go with 3 different time periods. One being the Old Testament-y stuff. This is going to be stuff that happened during the Old Testament or more historical things that happened before Christ. Then we're going to focus around the 1st century. That's going to be a little bit before the 1st century and a little bit after, but this is the time of Jesus essentially. Then we're going to be focusing on the early Christians and some other historical groups right after the time of Christ that are really important archaeologically within Israel. So for every episode in this series, we'll remind you of the timeline and the area that we're in order for you to have a better idea of what we're looking at here. Now, yes, we are very much simplifying a lot of this information, including the time frames and different things like that, but that's the whole point of this series, is to make these things real to you guys and show you exactly what is going on at the base level. And so if that's something that you're interested in, leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and we'd love to hear your thoughts about this Israel series overall. Last but not least, if you're interested in this map that we showed you earlier and you want to learn more about the 3 key areas in Israel, then you can go to our website, thesnipelife.com, and actually get this for yourself in a free printable file. So click that link in our description, you can go grab that. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this video, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.